Good morning, guys. It was a early start to the day today because I had my first of two appointments. I went and got my G-tube changed, which is just something that's super easy. That's done. Supposed to be done every 6 months. It was 8 months this time. It was 2 years before that, so it's sporadic. Before, when I wasn't using it, I didn't really care about getting it changed that much because I was never using it. But now that I am using it on an intermittent basis, it's good to stay on top of it. So I got a new one in, and it's all shiny because if you guys don't have a G-tube, they get like yellowish brown over time, just from I think stomach acid, and so they kind of get ugly. But when you get a new one, it's just like stunning white for about a week, and then it gets gross. But so it's like shiny. So anyway, we had to go at 6:30 to go do that, or I had to get up at 6:30. We had to leave at 7:15, and we went and did that. So that's done. I have an endocrine appointment on Friday, but in between that time, just relaxing today. Tomorrow we're heading to Hot Springs. So, um, yeah. So because I want to make tomorrow's vlog a bit more happy than the vlog was a year ago on this day, or tomorrow, I'm going to talk about what's on my mind today, because I think if I talk about it tomorrow, it's just going to be too much. So this time of year is just a little bit weird now, because obviously today is April 4th, and tomorrow, April 5th, will be 1 year since I lost Panda. And, I see the Facebook memories popping up of this time last year, actually right around this time in the afternoon, I think. Me and Panda went for a walk, actually kind of like almost for a run. It was Easter Sunday. We went for a run. I gave him like a special dinner because it was Easter. And then later that night, I loaded him up in the car and went over to my sister's house because I was watching Mason at that time. It was about to end, but I was watching Mason at that time. And so loaded him up, and I just remember when I got him in the car, he was just like super strong, super energetic, like holding onto the leash tight as I'm going down the stairs because that doggy loved the car. And just seemed the picture of health. And I woke up the next morning, and he was perfectly fine. Fed him around 12:30. He was his normal hyper self. I kept him in the crate. He had like this extra large crate. I kept him in the crate when I was watching Mason. Then he came out and walked and stuff in the evenings. So I let him out for a bit because I needed to put this liner on the bottom of the crate because his nails were making like this click clatty noise, and it was very annoying to all of us. So I was putting this like soft liner on the bottom of the crate. So I let him out, and he was running around. He was hyper because he knew he was about to be fed, and then he ran back in his cage, and he was just really seeming just like any other normal day. And then around the time my sister got home at 4:30, I was off duty watching Mason. She had just come down from taking a shower. She was ready to take over. And so that was the time I always went immediately, and almost most of the time went immediately. Sometimes I'd rest a little, but most of the time went immediately and go take Panda for a walk. And the first inclination I had that anything was wrong was that my sister was like, he pooped in his cage. And I was like, what? He never does that. I took him out for frequent potty breaks throughout the day, and I put Mason in his little bouncer or whatever, and I take Panda out to go potty. And so he'd only done that like once or twice his entire life. Whether he was in a crate or just, free roaming, he'd only pooped in the house once or twice his entire life. So I was like, what? That's weird, but I guess he just had some kind of stomach upset from eating or something. So when I went to go clean it, that's when I knew something was wrong, because I noticed that he hadn't only pooped, he had peed, and he was just kind of lying motionless on the bottom of the cage, just breathing really heavy, but wasn't responding to me, wasn't doing anything. And I don't ever know if I've talked about everything that happened in detail, but I kind of feel like I want to get it out because this is all that's on my mind. So he wasn't responding to me. At this point, I was kind of a little bit scared, but I cleaned up the mess in there and just kind of moved the blanket a little bit because he'd peed on the blanket. And I I was like, my sister came over and offered him a treat. He didn't respond at all. And so I was like, okay, let's try some wet cat food, because I think even when he had his neuter surgery where he did, and his heartworm treatment, where he didn't want to really eat treats or anything, he would take cat food. He never turned down cat food in his entire life. It was the like, I didn't really give it to him at all, except for during these like medical times where I was like, okay, is he okay? And also just like after surgery or whatever, just a little taste just so to get his appetite going. And he didn't respond to that either. He just laid there motionless. He was breathing. I knew he was breathing, but he just laid there motionless. So at that point, we coordinated trying to get him to a ER vet, searching up ER vets in the area because I knew something was really wrong. And about 5 minutes after we'd found a vet, we called them, told them we'd be on our way shortly, because my sister's husband was still at work, so he had to call his work and get off. And my sister had to stay home with Mason. And so we went to the vet. By the time we'd done all that, within about a span of 5 minutes, he was sitting up. He was semi-responding. But when I opened his mouth, his gums were just pure white. And that, I think, is when it sunk in that something is, like, seriously, seriously wrong. Like, I was thinking maybe he had a seizure or something, like some kind of epilepsy was happening because he was starting to get older. And that's when I was like, okay, this wasn't a seizure. This is something really serious. And so we took him to the first vet. We were there for a couple of hours. I don't know exactly how long. The whole thing was 6 hours. They said that his liver values were off the charts, but they couldn't really tell what was going on. And long story short, he was transferred to another vet. They told me at that time that they thought this was just a really bad case of gastroenteritis and that he would recover with some intensive antibiotic and fluid therapy for 24 hours. That's what I was told. So that's what I was going into thinking, because that's what they told me. By the time we got him to the second vet, which was like a 15-minute drive, he had gone rapidly downhill. And the tech carried him into the vet, and they immediately put him on the table and just started doing all sorts of things that you don't want to see happening to your dog. You know, I am a person that loves vet shows. I love them. But not when it's happening to your own animal. It is traumatizing. And most of these images I'm able to forget now, but they've been popping up right now. So he already had an IV in from the other vet, so they hooked him up to fluids. They started doing an ultrasound, and they noticed there was a lot of fluid in his belly. They didn't know what it was, so they pulled it out. And I can only describe it as shock and horror when they showed me it, and she was like, that's blood that's in his stomach. And that's when I knew this wasn't gastroenteritis. And so they kept doing ultrasounds and stuff. She told me there was a spot on his liver. His spleen was basically unrecognizable, and he had fluid around his heart. And he was just in a really bad way. And at that point, they were kind of doing last-ditch things like giving him epinephrine and stuff. She said sometimes when they have these spots, it can be some kind of allergic reaction. Now, we had no idea where this allergic reaction could have come from. She said it probably wasn't unlikely, but at this point, it was worth trying. So they started giving him epinephrine and stuff. And yeah, that was the time when I watched him code right in front of me, which is probably one of the, if not the worst thing I have ever seen in my entire life. Because they had him hooked up to all the monitors because they saw his blood pressure was dropping. And she was listening to his heart, and then I saw her start doing compressions, and I just completely lost it. And went to the vet tech. Josh stayed in the room. My sister's husband stayed in the room with Panda. And I just couldn't. I was hysterical. And so the vet tech took me to a separate little room that you could kind of tell was like the room that was for trying to calm people down because it wasn't furnished like an exam room. It had like a couch and a rug and quiet music playing with dim lights. Like, I just remember the vet tech was crying too. I'm sure I was quite the sight. But so they did end up getting him back. I don't know how long. It felt like an eternity when you're hearing them doing CPR on your own dog. But I heard them all cheering and clapping, and they said they got him back. But there was nothing else to do. He was too far gone for surgery. They'd tried all the other stuff to do, and at that point I made the decision to put him down because there was nothing to do. And it was one of the worst days of my life. So I don't think I've ever shared the full story. That's what happened. What it ended up being was that I didn't know even existed until that day was something called canine hemangiosarcoma, which is basically cancer of the blood vessels. It can go anywhere. And usually the first sign that something is wrong is when something ruptures, and his spleen ruptured. So I have a feeling that first initial bit of what I think was probably unconsciousness, where he wasn't responding to anything, was when it happened. And during that next 6 hours, he was just bleeding internally until his body couldn't cope with it anymore. And unfortunately, once you hit that point, there's not much you can do. Even if you did surgery, the dog usually only lives for about 3 to 6 more months. And even if I had the funds to do it, I don't think it would be fair to the dog. And even if he was stable enough to do it, even the vet said, like, it's not fair to them because they're going to live the rest of their short lives in pain. So the better thing to do is let him go. The only thing I wish, besides that it never happened, was that first vet had been more competent and not told me something was gastroenteritis when my dog was literally bleeding out. Because he could have been saved a lot of suffering, and I could have been saved the mental image of watching them do CPR on my dog. So, but it's a scary, scary cancer. It is a scary thing. The only comfort I take from it is that the dog doesn't even really feel much. We lost another dog to lung cancer when she was really old, and she was kind of going downhill for a while. But with Panda, who wasn't that old, he was just turned 8 2 months prior, he didn't know it was there, just like we didn't know it was there, and he was happy right up until the end. Actually, one of my short, bittersweet memories from that day is, throughout the 6 hours he got progressively weaker, but the first time we took him to the vet, he was able to walk to the car very slowly, but he was able to walk to the car, which was just pathetic because normally that dog nearly pulled my arm out doing that. But as he was getting into the car, he was just slowly, weakly wagging his tail. Like, he was literally bleeding out, but that dog was still so happy to get in the car that he started wagging his tail when I put him in the car. So, yeah, that's the story of what happened, and that would be April 5th tomorrow, but it's just been on my mind so much. I think I've done a lot better healing-wise. I'm on this group on Facebook that's called Life After HSA, which is hemangiosarcoma, which has been a big help because when you're going through it, you feel so alone, but then you read, even though you don't want this to ever happen to anybody else, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. It's this group of all these other people that have gone through the same thing as you, that have lost their dogs in such a traumatic way, and they understand. And, since then, I fostered the 2 dogs. I fostered Dobby, and I fostered, I don't even remember the first one's name. I only had him for 2 days, but Sergeant, that's what it was. I fostered Sergeant and Dobby, but ultimately they both didn't work out, and I don't know when I'll be ready for another dog. After I lost Bella, I got Panda 11 days later, but it's been a year and I still don't think I'm anywhere close to ready. I love on Yachty, but I'm not anywhere close to ready for another dog. And he was definitely the one in a million. He was the most amazing dog anybody could ever ask for, and even with how terrible everything ended, I would do it all over again in a heartbeat with him. He was my buddy. He got me through losing Brooke. He got me through when I had the anaphylactic reaction. He got me through depression. I got to move halfway across the country with him. He was just the best dog you could ever ask for. Just the best dog. He had his downsides. He was not the easiest dog in the world to deal with around other dogs because he was fearful, but I still miss him like crazy, and there's not much I can do about it, but I just feel like we need an answer to hemangiosarcoma so nobody has to deal with losing their dog like that, because it is the worst feeling ever. But today, and hopefully tomorrow, I choose to think about the happy memories, all the fun times we had, the crazy weird things we did that I'm surprised nobody got injured sometimes. And he'll always be in here, and it gets easier. It gets easier with time. I don't just sit and cry at the drop of a hat anymore. But something I think to remember is that he had 8 wonderful years and 6 bad hours, and for the vast majority of his life, he was this happy little guy. And, well, not little. He thought he was little. He thought he was a lap dog, but and yeah, I love him. It's not I loved him, it's I love him. So that's what's on my mind. And tomorrow we'll go to Hot Springs, and tonight I'll go see Maddie and just hang out. But I think there's also reflection going on. So I will see you guys tomorrow.